and welcome to my rhythm cycling channel. My name is Guevara and I'm a rhythm cycling instructor and fitness trainer. 6 years ago, I opened the first indoor cycling studio in South Texas. And in those years, I had the privilege of witnessing countless success stories and transformative relationships with exercise. I cannot stress the importance of proper bike setup for rhythm cycling, so please allow me to ensure that you're getting the most out of each and every ride. So first things first, most stationary bikes will usually have 4 points of adjustment. So let's get started with the saddle. Quick side note before we get started, keep in mind that most humans are not anatomically identical, so this is definitely a generalized explanation, so fine-tuning may be required for your body. The most important adjustment on your bike is definitely going to be your saddle height adjustment. If that saddle is not to your specifications, you may experience issues in the knee and in the back, such as pain or discomfort. So it's extremely important that it is set to your height and your specifications. And the way we can determine that is by finding your hip bone. So I'm pretty tall, I'm about 5'11", and the way I'm going to determine whether the saddle is high enough for me is by finding my hip bone and placing my fingers approximately 2 inches below my hip bone. This is going to ensure proper alignment in the pedals when we're both riding in the saddle and out of the saddle. So once you find your hip bone and you place your fingers approximately 1.5 inches to 2 inches below, stand right up against your bike and notice where your saddle is. Obviously this one is extremely low, so let's go ahead and bring it up. If you're not extremely sure that this is the proper adjustment for you, a great way to test it out is by hopping on the bike and pedaling it out. If you feel you're reaching, it may be too high. If you feel your knee is kind of being a little too bent when you bring it up on the upstroke, then it might be a little too low. So let's go ahead and test this new height out. So at this new adjustment, my knees are comfortable on the downstroke as well as on the upstroke without hyperextending or overbending. We can also check this adjustment by taking it out of the saddle and also noticing that the saddle is not bumping on the booty. So this is a perfect setup for my specification. So an example of being too low on your bike may look like this. My knees are hyper bending at the top of the stroke, which is extremely uncomfortable and can lead to issues. And an example of being too high may look like this. My knee is locking on the downstroke, which can also lead to discomfort and issues. So another extremely important adjustment on your bike that is often overlooked is the saddle distance from the handlebar. So let's make sure that that is set up properly on your bike. In rhythm cycling, the rule of thumb is usually the distance from your elbow to your fingertips to ensure that you are properly distanced from your handlebar. So I'm taking my elbow to the top of my fingertips at the tip of the saddle to the handlebar. Now this is a little too close. I'm going to make a slight adjustment so that I can make sure that it is the proper alignment for my specifications. So after making that very small but important adjustment, I'm going to check using this rule of thumb to make sure that my elbow to my fingertips is the same distance from the tip of the saddle to the tip of the handlebar. And this looks like this should work perfect for me. And the reason that this adjustment is so important is for engagement of the abs, whether you're in or out of the saddle. Oftentimes, if your hips are too close to the handlebar, you may notice your spine with a slight curvature, and this will not work as far as ab engagement. But if your hips are slightly further back while you're reaching into the handlebar with the proper distance, you'll notice your core work a little harder. So this is why it's extremely important to make sure that your hips are the proper distance from the handlebars. So let's go ahead and try this out. While I'm sitting here in the saddle, my sits bones are on the widest part of the saddle, meaning that they are as far back as they can go. I'm going to lean into the handlebar and notice that I am extremely relaxed. I have a slight bend in my elbow and my shoulders are dropped. And here, as I'm leaning into the handlebar, my abs are almost forcibly engaged. So this is how I know that I am the proper distance as far as hips from the handlebar. An example of being too close to the handlebar, which is oftentimes the case, may look like this. You'll notice that my spine is a little bit more curved as my hips are too close to this handlebar, not leaving enough space and range for my abdomen to be engaged. So it is important to make sure that your hips are the proper distance from the handlebar to the saddle. So moving on to the next very important adjustment on your bike, this is going to be the height of the handlebars. Now in my experience, I've seen a lot of handlebars way too low, and oftentimes this causes a lot of pain and discomfort in the lower back. So it's extremely important that we make sure that it is adjusted, again, to your specifications, so let's make sure it's set up properly. So another rule of thumb for rhythm cycling, again, this is going to be a very generalized explanation as each body is different. But the usual rule of thumb is once we take our elbow to our fingertip and we find that proper distance, we take 4 fingers or approximately 2 inches higher so that we can set up or find the proper height for our handlebars. So let's go ahead and try that. All right, so once you've adjusted your height to approximately 2 inches above your saddle, we can test it out. So here I'm taking my elbow to my handlebars and trying to make a straight as of a line as I possibly can using my arm. And then I'll use about 4 fingers to measure 2 inches, and you'll notice that this is a proper setup for my specification. So here you'll notice at this measurement, my upper body is slightly leaning into my handlebars, but I'm relaxed at the elbow and at the shoulder. You'll notice I'm not reaching for my handlebars and I'm relaxed, resting my hands on the handlebars. Here's an example of having my handlebars a little too low for comfort, putting a lot of pressure and stress in my upper back as well as in my lower back. Oftentimes, this is the position that is ideal for road cycling, but since this is rhythm cycling, we like to have the adjustment slightly higher. So now because I am pretty tall, I usually ride on the highest setting. So Wendy is here to help us show an example if the handlebars are too high. Wendy is 5'2", and we have the handlebars on the highest setting. Now while she looks comfortable in the saddle, if she were to bring herself out of the saddle, the handlebars are a little too close for comfort, and in rhythm cycling we love to do movements and choreography, and she will not get the most or the benefit of presses and tap backs because that handlebar is a little bit too high. Although it is not causing stress in her upper back, it is not going to allow her to engage her core as much as we'd like. So it's extremely important that you make sure that that handlebar is approximately 2 inches above your saddle. So the last and final adjustment on your bike, which may not seem really significant, is actually most significant, and that is going to be the distance of your handlebar to your saddle. Now remember that we made this adjustment on the saddle. We can also make this adjustment on your handlebar. Most bikes offer this adjustment, but some bikes don't. If your bike offers this adjustment, please take advantage of it. So we're going to use the same rule of thumb that we did to measure our saddle from our handlebar by using our elbow to our fingertip, the elbow to fingertip method. Now you'll notice here that this is a little bit too far than what would be comfortable for me. So it is important to make this adjustment so that you have that distance correct. After making the adjustment, check your work using the elbow to fingertip method, and you'll see that this is maybe still a little bit too far for my liking. Bring it in a little closer. Remember that I mentioned at the beginning of this video that fine tuning is definitely going to be something that you'll have to consider when making these adjustments. After we make that adjustment, this seems a lot better for my specifications, and let's go ahead and try it out. So here is an example of me having proper bike setup all the way around. I have a slight bend in my hip, which creates a perfect angle to the pedals. I am not reaching too far to put strain on my back, but comfortably relaxed here in this position in the saddle. And if I were to take my position to second, I am also comfortable and relaxed all the way around. So an example of having your handlebars too far forward may look like this. You'll notice that in reaching for those handlebars, you may experience tension and pain and discomfort in the upper back from having to reach so far forward. So again, it is extremely important to make sure that they are adjusted to your specifications. And lastly, an example of having those handlebars too close may lead to a couple of things. One being your knees hitting the handlebars, which can be extremely uncomfortable and painful, but also a lack of engagement in the abs. Having those handlebars too close to you may cause you to be a little more relaxed and not as engaged as we typically prefer in rhythm cycling. So again, extremely important to make sure that you have the proper distance from your saddle to your handlebar. So because cycling is so low impact on your body, oftentimes it's surprising to hear about lower back pain and knee pain. I can 100% guarantee that this is usually because your bike is not set up to your specifications. So please head over to your bike and make sure that it is set up properly for you. There should never be any pain or discomfort in your knees and in your back. And if you're still experiencing these issues even after setting up your bike, please send me an email and I'd be more than happy to help you out in getting that bike properly set up for you. A couple of helpful tips before we conclude our tutorial today. One, I always recommend bikes having at least a 40-pound flywheel so that you can feel nice, safe, solid, and secure when you're riding. And second, I always encourage riders to invest in cleats, cycling cleats, and clip pedals. This helps you feel secure and solid as well. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you'd love to check out some more insights that I have to offer, such as tutorials, nutrition, and over 300 rides on demand, please head over to my app. We'd love to have you join the Kittens Club. $1 access for all of that content, interruption and ad-free. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys soon.